Welcome everyone to episode... I'm on the home stretch now. After this episode it's just 2 RPGs and 2 platformers and I'm done. So what have I been playing this week? Something special. Seiken Densetsu San. That's Legend of the Holy Sword 3. The long-awaited sequel to Secret of Mana that would never come. I remember reading about it in magazines back in 1995. There were whispers that it might be called Power of Mana or Legend of Mana or just Secret of Mana 2, but that makes no difference because the game was never localized. The official reports say it was because there were bugs in the game that would have been too difficult to iron out. I wonder if it was more likely the translation job was too huge and Square just didn't think the audience was big enough to make its localization money back. Anyway, it was a game that seemed doomed to remain a Japanese oddity until something happened in the late 90s. The Internet.
Internet, eh?
A guy named Neil Corlett took it upon himself to hack into the game and translate the whole thing for distribution on the web. And he did it! A single man did what an entire company couldn't do, bring Seiken 3 to the masses. For the really hardcore, you can now buy Super Nintendo cartridges that have the translated ROM inside with a full box, manual and everything. So essentially you're getting the exact game that we were denied back in 1995. One for the real collectors. They do not go cheap though, even on eBay. I've been trying to get my hands on one of these awesome replicas for months now, but they are rare. The last eBay auction I lost out on, the cart ended up selling for over 200 British pounds. That's like 300 bucks. Wow. So let's delve into the game itself. It's so massive I hardly know where to begin. Seiken 3 was undoubtedly Square's most ambitious RPG to date. Want a main character? Here, have 6. See, what you need to do right at the start of the game is direct the hand of fate and select 3 of these guys to make up your party. The others will appear in the story, but they won't be playable. The order in which you choose the characters will determine the flow of the story as well, so as you can see, before the game's even started there are countless different ways to play it. That's not even including the class changing, but we'll get to that later. For this run through I chose the elf girl Lys, the gladiator Duran, and the mage Angela. Because I chose to start with Lys, my story began in the mountain realm of Relante. Princess Lys starts the game searching for her little brother who's been kidnapped by a couple of ninja magicians. And so she sets out on a rescue mission, unaware that she and her comrades will soon determine the fate of the free world. The battle system is a more refined version of the previous games. It's still based on an attack-retreat pattern where you have to wait for your attack to be fully charged to do any damage. But this time, with each successful attack, you also charge up your special move meter, and when that's full you can do a more powerful attack. Square did a brilliant job upgrading the battles into something more fast-paced, more exciting and more involving, while still making sure it feels related to the previous game. It's not as easy to bypass enemies anymore since you'll immediately go into battle mode when you get close to them, so no matter where you're going you pretty much need to clear each screen of monsters before you move on. It can be a bit annoying if you're just trying to get somewhere and you have to stop every screen and clear out the enemies, but thankfully the battle system's pretty quick so you'll move through before long. One of the great features of Seiken 3 is its class change system. Basically, there's 2 points in the game where your characters can change their class and therefore their abilities, stats and magic spells. The first one is after you reach level 18. When you change class, you can choose to follow the light path or the dark path. In this instance, Lys can either become a Valkyrie on the light path or a rune maiden on the dark path. Both valid choices, but both sending her in different directions as far as the abilities she'll learn and her future stats. I chose Valkyrie. When you get to the second class change, you get another choice. So by following the light path, she would become a Vanadis, but by changing and sending her down the dark path, she becomes a Star Lancer, which is what I eventually had her become. With Duran, I had him go dark and then light to become a Sword Master, and Angela also went dark then light, so she ended up as a Rune Master. You definitely want to do your research here to make sure you get the party that you want. So, not only do you get to choose 3 out of 6 characters, there are ultimately 6 different classes you can have them each become. How much replay value could this game possibly have? As you can see, the good old ring menu is back, but this time it's only used for items and magic. Everything else is organised through a big 9-panel visual menu that has all of the info you'd ever need to know about your characters, and then some. There's also a real-time day-night system which is just too cool, and it was years before Ocarina of Time made it popular. Not only that, but there's a 7-day weekly cycle as well, so things will change around the world depending on what day of the week it is. Stuff like this just goes to show how ambitious this game was, especially for its time. Lots of old favourites are back: the Rabbites, the turban shopkeepers, and of course, Flanny. I love Flanny. But before she carries you around the world, you also get to ride on a giant turtle called Buskaboo. The first half of the game is all about going on a voyage to find the 8 elemental spirits. These little guys should be familiar to anyone who's played the previous game. After that, your mission is to defeat the massive mana god beasts. These boss battles are awesomely epic, and facing off against these monsters is definitely one of the highlights of the game. Some of these battles are intense. It's worth mentioning that Seiken 3 can be a brutally difficult game, especially against some of those said bosses. Much more so than Seiken 2, there are points where you simply cannot progress in this game unless you've invested some time into levelling up your characters with the grind. Luckily, the battle system's pretty cool, so it's not too much of a pain, but it's there nonetheless. If you're not a fan of grinding, you probably won't get very far. I've also got to mention the beautiful graphics, which have more artistry and detail than pretty much any 16-bit game out there. For example, let's compare this desert scene from Seiken 2 with the desert in Seiken 3. There's no comparison. The game is stunning. Being on a 32 meg cart, Square had twice as much space to fill as in the previous game, and fill it they did. Unfortunately, there still seems to be some frames of animation missing from the main characters, and their running cycles look jerky, but that's a small price to pay when the world you're playing in is so rich and lush in design. Kikuta-san returned to create the music, and it's just a beautiful soundtrack. I'd say it probably doesn't have as many memorable tunes as Secret of Mana did, but the overall sound production is much better. Even though the Mana series has continued on well into the future of Seiken 3, it never hit the heights again. There was the quirky Legend of Mana, which many people hate. I actually love it, especially the beautiful graphics and the quirky story and the stunning soundtrack by Yoko Shimomura. But it's a different type of game, and not what I consider a true sequel. Then there was Sword of Mana, the remake of the first Seiken game. Then Children of Mana, a fairly bland dungeon crawler. There's also Heroes of Mana, which was a real-time strategy game for crying out loud. And then the official sequel, Seiken Densetsu 4, Dawn of Mana. I've never actually played this since it never got a PAL release, but from what I've heard, I'm not missing out on much. Wildly disappointing is how I've heard it described. So fans still sit and wonder, when oh when is Square Enix going to make a real sequel? I can imagine something with beautiful hand-drawn graphics like Muramasa, but with gameplay just like Seiken 3. It would be incredible. Heck, they could even give a graphical overhaul to this game and re-release it to critical acclaim. You know when you play a game and it just owns you? When you never get that "I should probably stop now" feeling? I got that with this game. It's superb. If you love Secret of Mana, imagine that game cranked up to 11. Everyone considers Secret of Mana to be one of the Super Nintendo's greatest games, and it is. But its sequel, Power of Mana, Legend of Mana, Secret of Mana 2, whatever you call it, is even better in just about every conceivable way. In my eyes, Squaresoft had a holy trinity of 16-bit RPG heaven: Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Seiken 3. It's absolutely criminal that to this day, it's still never been officially released outside Japan, because it puts almost all of Square Enix's modern RPGs to shame by demonstrating pretty much everything that I love about RPGs. In my eyes, it's better than Terranigma, better than Chrono Trigger. It's one of the Super Nintendo's all-time greatest games, and that's a fact. Next week, it's more RPG goodness, this time with a mushroomy twist. Peace out.